How's it going, peeps? What's going on today, everybody? Just made a video a little while ago about being sick, and I just deleted it because I was like, yeah, I'm not going to sit and complain about being sick. It wasn't a video complaining, but rather talking about how we view being sick and how, if you've ever had chronic pain for a long period of time, you know, it really makes you grateful when you're not in pain. And I was thinking about, you know, 3 different types of pain, which would be, I guess, emotional, mental, and physical. Sickness, I guess, could be a physical pain as well, but having a cold sometimes gives you, it opens up the universe as, kind of like when you have fever dreams, let's say. I just had a cold, you know, a little congestion, but sometimes when you get a really bad cold and it puts you in kind of a fever state, and you start having these circular, recurring dreams and ideas over and over, and often they seem meaningless, but they're almost like recurring dreams that are somewhat telling you something, but it's very hard to make out, you know, like our subconscious and the way it talks to us. And anyhow, this video specifically wasn't about that. I just kind of wanted to mention that at the beginning, that through our own pain we can learn to understand others' pain, and how important that is, and how people who have never faced any real travesty or pain in their life just don't seem to get it. And someone may reply to that, well, everyone's faced pain in their life, and everyone's had some sort of problems in their life. They just may not seem as big of a problem to someone else. And this is true, but there are universal issues which exceed the boundaries of other types of pain, you know? In other words, you know, getting a divorce from your wife, or you know, having your kids hate you or something, those can be devastating things. But to absolutely to not be able to afford to eat, to have to wonder where your next meal is coming from, and to feel like, you know, you don't know what you're going to do with your life, that it's overwhelming, or having chronic pain to where you can't move, like I did with sciatica for a while, you're just really grateful when you're over it. So you start to see the world as not so black and white when you've been through more shit in your life, I think. And this is interesting because it kind of ties into what this video I was really going to talk about, which was money and how we view money, and the discussions I've had in the past about how, you know, it's how I'll start off with my position on money. I really despise the fact that I have to use money, but I also understand that if it wasn't for money, we'd just have to trade some other type of promissory note or use metals. Ultimately, nobody wants gold or silver, nor does anybody want, you know, huge stockpiles of grain. They want to just be able to live. The person with the excess grain trades it for other goods. If a person's going to have goods that will be available months from now and they need grain now, you write them a note that says, I will pay you this much of my grain later. And that's called a promissory note, and that's the basis for dollar bills, okay? Now, if you set aside the idea of, if you set aside Jekyll Island, which is where the Federal Reserve prints all of our money, if you set aside all of the corruption and illegitimate, pretty much the entire monetary system is corrupt so bad, it's corrupted so bad by people and by our own ignorance, not always on purpose, that not even the best economists, I think, can really grasp what's going on in a world standard. You might be able to figure out within one country how the money system works, but to interlink all the different forms of trade through the planet and to really understand what's going on, I don't think it's possible. And even if a person could understand it, I don't think they'd ever be able to convey it to anyone else, even in a whole series of books. And that's beside the point, because nobody really wants to know the details. What we want to know is, how can we live with enough money to be happy? While at the same time there are people who, let's say this minimalism movement, or, you know, the small homes kind of movement, where people are moving into, you know, smaller units and spending less and using less. I really think that we're onto something here as a society, but it's only in the Western world, okay? Now there are people who you know, over in Africa or South America who live in small huts, not because they're trying to downsize, but because that's all they have. But does it mean they're unhappy because they don't have a nice house? No, of course not. Or they don't have a boat or an ATV. No. In fact, you see, a lot of the people seem quite happy with their lives. So we start to ask ourselves, so if money really isn't the root of evil, but it's not also the root of happiness, then what is it that we're after as people? And I think this is crucial. This is why we need to all dissect this in our own minds and pick this apart and say, what is it that truly brings us happiness? Because there are folks who really spend years of their life accumulating wealth, thinking that that's eventually going to hit a point where they're going to be happy. And you know what? For some of them, it might. It might be all they need. Perhaps for some people, spending money and having fun is all that matters. But when we look in our hearts, we say, well, there's something missing there. What about family? So you say, okay, I want to have a great, loving family and incorporate that in with, and to use the wealth to help my friends, my family, right? And then you say, well, what else is there besides just family? Well, we got family and friends and connection and love. Well, we need to have experiences. So we start to find out that buying stuff only gets you excited for a couple of minutes while you're buying it, and then it just sits on the shelf or wherever. Maybe you even use it, but everything loses its novelty quickly. What's the one thing that doesn't lose novelty? Experiences. I mean, if you do, I'm not talking about over time, if you do the same thing over and over, you will get bored with it eventually. But if instead of buying, say, a $5,000 flat screen TV, you take a $5,000 vacation with a couple of good friends to fly over the Andes and check out the mountains and maybe do some backcountry skiing, whatever it might be. Think about it for a minute. Those memories that you have already of your past, and each one of you have your own past, but I'm sure you've got some great memories from your childhood, from your teen years, or your 20s, 30s, whatever it might be, that you say, wow, that's what it's all about. And we have these little moments of awareness where we know what really matters. And that's what really matters, is experiences with loved ones and connections. So, in my opinion, I'm just kind of generalizing here. So we can say that connections are something that we all share and we're all looking for. Acceptance is something that we're all looking for. And to be able to truly love someone and trust and have trust in other people. So if you have a family and you love each other, you're already doing okay. So what's the next step? Well, once you have all those things, then you need to be able to live and have the experiences. And that's where you're back to money again. Same old problem. And I've, the times when I've made pretty good money, like when I was a carpenter working for myself, there was a time when I was making about, well, I was charging my own wage, but I was charging $40 an hour, which isn't a lot in construction. In fact, the people I had worked for would bill us out at like 65 or more. But that was fair to the people I was working for, and it was fair to me, and that was a lot of money to me, bringing home that, and my wife was a waitress. And there was a time when we were kind of at the best we'd done. This was like, 6, 7 years ago. And within a year from that, my back gave out. My sciatica just got so bad. I had been ignoring it. And I was ignoring the fact that I had to give up an entire career, something that I had really worked towards on and off, Was it a true passion to be a carpenter or a contractor? No. But to build with wood and to create? Yes, it was. And that's the same thing that happened when I moved on to my kratom business. I figured that would be something that could help me, cover some of my bills in the meantime until I built something up. And the passion was there because I love herbs. And I still do. And I still am, trying to make it work, but at the same time saying, my passion isn't being a merchant. My passion isn't just selling things or, buying and reselling. My nightmare job would be selling on eBay, buying stuff or selling it on Craigslist, just on and on and on, constantly buying and selling stuff. I don't like reselling stuff. I really like creating, and I like creating something from nothing or from raw materials and then using that as like, look at what I made out of it. And I do take pride in the things that I make, my art, but within a couple days, I look at it again and it's like, oh, yeah, I can't charge that much for that, or, and this has always been my downfall, and I guess this is the reason why I'm sharing this with you. Any of you out there who may be, especially the younger crowd, who are stuck in that paradigm of, well, I shouldn't yearn for money because money is the root of all evil, but also realizing consciously that you need it to survive. You say, well, how much do I need to survive? Here's the thing that I've found. It's not about how much you make. It's not about how much you work either. People who brag that, oh, I worked 60, 70, 80 hours last week. I mean, I hear this all the time. For people, obviously, know in their hearts that, they think that it's somehow prideful to say I worked this much time. And I hear stories about people who maybe, work 80 hours a week, who are barely ever home, and they say that they do it for their kids and their family. And then they buy a bigger house and a nicer car. They lease a nicer car, and meanwhile, they're missing the one crucial thing, the most important thing that we all work for, which is time. Time for the experiences with our families. So to me, do I regret the experiences I've had? No. Do I think I've wasted time in my life? Yes, I think I could have done more, and I still think I can. I mean, I'm only 42. But finding that motivation gets harder as you get older. So for all the youngins out there in your 20s, take initiative and take charge of that oomph that you have, that that excitement to make things work, because and never let yourself be defeated. If you feel like, well, my job didn't work out, or this happens all the time. In fact, they say kids today, people who are born today will average like 12 jobs in their lifetime, whereas back in the day it was like, live, work for your wage, retire, get your Social Security, make it work. My generation, Gen X, and all that came after them have been yearning for a little bit more and desiring something greater. But also doesn't mean that we're right. There's a little bit of arrogance and cockiness to new generations saying, oh, all you old timers fucked it all up and we're going to make it work now. Because as you get older, you start to understand why things are so important to people, why friendship is, why money is important, not for your own good or your own sake, but to help others. I mean, I thought about maybe starting a nonprofit or a fundraiser of some sorts to try to do something great in the world, but I don't even know what, it's very difficult. And then people become suspicious too. If you want to do a nonprofit or a charity, you have to convince others that you're doing it for the right reasons. And I've seen enough people who aren't doing it for the right reasons, who just want donations, and then they don't want to, discuss where the money goes. And it's like, the point being that we live in a world where it's really hard to trust each other. And even the people who are the good guys, Red Cross, for example, a lot of Red Cross donations went, people were asking, hey, where did all this money go that was donated for this hurricane or that earthquake? And found out that there's a lot of siphoning going on. This is the problem with money. It's not that money is the problem, it's that when there's a lot of it, it spills over the banks. It's too easy for people to skim off the top. And when people see it, even metaphorically, piles of cash, well, there's $1 billion in this account, and it's supposed to go to help, this particular disease. Well, I have to pay myself too. Well, I'm going to pay myself a good wage of $1 million a year, that kind of stuff. So I think what it comes down to is being honest and fair with ourselves and with others. And honesty is in short supply. I gotta say, you know it when you see it, and there's plenty of honesty out there. There's nothing I dislike more than a liar. We all elaborate on things. We might make something sound like it was greater than it was or worse than it was, and I know people tend to, have, horrible memories when it comes to things as well. But if you're a blatant liar or a cheater, it's the one thing that I've always seen as the lowest of the low. Say a group of friends are sitting around playing cards and one of your friends cheats on the game, or poker, anything. I would instantly, that would be the last time I would play a game with that person. It's basically like, I'm done. This is supposed to be an enjoyable experience where it's more than just a game. Games show us more than just who can compete. And some people say cheating's part of the game. In fact, in professional sports, I've heard, professional sports supporters who say, when you bring that up and you say, well, what about cheating? They say, oh, well, that's just part of the game. If you can cheat and get away with it, then hey, that's okay. Bullshit. Complete bullshit. Anybody who justifies cheating by saying, well, as long as you can get away with it, that is carried into all of our actions and transactions in daily life. It's just like saying, well, if this customer paid a little more and I can get away with it, or this, this vendor I bought this product from and they sent me 3 on accident, or whatever it might be. We all kind of maybe go, oh, well, I'll let this one slide. And we want to minimize the amount of times that we compromise our integrity, because you'll know when you've done something wrong. And monetarily, people do work hard for their money. Even if we picture it as just paper, or just, oh, well, money doesn't exist. It does exist because we use it. So it's kind of like saying, well, the universe doesn't matter because nothing's real, and matter is mostly empty space, so therefore we don't even really exist. We're in the Matrix. So what? If this is the matrix, it's the matrix we're in, right? Well, the same thing with money. We're stuck with it. And so I think that honesty is really the best policy for all of us to trust one another. If we're ever to trust one another, it's painful because business isn't always honest, and that makes it very difficult. It makes you just sometimes want to escape if you're an honest person. But I could go on to say, well, exactly what is honesty, and why do I care if we're honest? What does it matter in the long run? That comes down to my own personal values, so they could be flawed too. Maybe somebody out there is thinking, well, I could just take what I want in this life and screw everybody else. And I'd say, you can have that philosophy if it works, but most of the time it doesn't work. There are very few people who can get away with screwing others over and leading a truly enjoyable life, because it seems to be ingrained within us. Whether it's genetic, whether it's learned, it doesn't really matter. Most people find that when they wrong others, they feel bad about it. And the small exception are the sociopaths out there, which, you know, we have different brains, let's just say, all of us do, and some people are a lot less likely to feel emotional or empathetic towards others. And we do have to live with those people, but can't use that as an excuse for us to be dishonest. Got to be straightforward. Got to be straightforward with our lives, with what we really need, with how important money really is to us. Just making sure we can live and get by. But the one aspect I want to point out is that the work is the thing that's always overlooked. It's not about having the money, it's about the work. We love to work, and when you have a meaningful job, if you have a meaningful work in your life, even if you're just an artist on the side and you don't get paid for it, having meaningful work in your life is something that we've found through so many psychological studies have been found to be the most important aspect of people's lives. So really, it's just doing our best, right? So that's my ramble for the day. I'm gonna go now. Been on 16, 17 minutes here. So honesty is the best policy, but there is a rule there. Nice guys often finish last, but I would rather finish last looking around at the beautiful world than, you know, checking my wallet to see how much profit I've made and finish first. Talk to y'all later.